Thanks everybody for being with us today. We appreciate your time and understand that this is, as Lisa was indicating, it's an interim meeting of the Wisconsin Egg Export Council. So it's meant to provide informational updates and a chance to consider what we're going to talk about next for the Wisconsin Egg Export Council. Just as a reminder, our next meeting is going to be the next quarterly meeting of the Wisconsin Egg Export Council is going to be on September 23rd. I think that's the date that we had discussed previously. We'll jump into the agenda soon, but I can let you know that DATCAP and our partners at WEDC will use today's meeting to summarize export data for agriculture and all goods. Again, meant to be informational in advance of our September meeting. But before we get to that, here's a few updates from the last interim meeting that we had. When we last met, we talked about DATCAP submitting a request to the legislature's Joint Finance Committee to release the second year of funding for the Wisconsin Initiative for Egg Exports. So that we can implement year 2 of our plan to increase exports across the agricultural groups of dairy products, meat and meat products, and crops. The request was made, and consistent with the bipartisan support that we've seen since Governor Evers first put the Wisconsin Initiative on Egg Exports in his budget. We saw the Joint Finance Committee unanimously approve the funding yesterday, in fact, $558,400. So we have now secured funding for year 2 of the Wisconsin Initiative on Egg Exports. So we're happy to proceed with that. As we indicated in our last discussion, we anticipated that this would be a pretty good probability. And I also wanted to just make sure to say thank you to 2 of our ex officio members who are on the Joint Finance Committee, Senator Ballweg and Representative Kurtz, for their ongoing support with the Wisconsin Initiative for Egg Exports and their votes in support yesterday of moving forward with year 2 of funding. A couple other things I just wanted to mention also, since we last got together, there was a USDA sponsored trade mission to the Philippines, which Krista Knigge from our team was able to attend. We won't get into the details of that mission specifically this time with the interim group, because we wanted to make sure we have a chance to go through the data and information that we've compiled for you. But I just wanted to let you know that that's occurred, and that we will include a summary of that and some of the other trade activities we've had when we get to our September Wisconsin Egg Export Council meeting. Just a heads up that that's going to happen. And then I guess the last thing that I'll do at this point is I will make a transition to Katie Sinnott, our partner from the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. She's the VP of Global Trade and Investment at WEDC, and she's going to go through export data for all goods and services. And so with that, I am happy to transition to Katie and hand the microphone over to her for her presentation. Thanks, Katie, for being with us today.
Great. Thank you, Secretary Romanski. I think you should be able to see my slides. Is that a thumbs up? I guess. Yep. Yes. Great. So thank you for having me. I'm really excited to present to you kind of an overview of all of the trade numbers briefly for 2021, as well as year-to-date 2022. And I will also be talking about how DATCAP and WEDC collaborates heavily on the programs that we have in place, and talk to that really important relationship that we have together. I think Mark will be talking in more detail about the trade numbers, and he can talk about the systems as well that we share together. So just briefly looking at our top exports for 2021, this is an overview of the full year. 85% of our goods exported were industrial machinery and manufactured goods overall. You can see that ag products ranked second, and this is actually what we call a super category. If you looked at the individual categories, which Mark is going to go into in full detail, they would not be as present and as obvious as the impact of ag exports has on the state of Wisconsin. Therefore, at WEDC, we put them together in a super category so we can see that full impact. So in 2021, we exported almost $25 billion worth of goods to 207 countries, and that was an increase of 21% over 2020. I'm sure that all of the companies on the phone remember 2020 and how difficult that was, particularly in March, April, and May, when our exports took double-digit dives. So we've seen an incredible rebound both in 2021 and you'll see very shortly in 2022. So Wisconsin's economy is robust and healthy in many areas, and you'll see that here in our year-to-date 2022 numbers. So in the first half of 2022, Wisconsin's businesses exported almost, excuse me, did you lose the screen? No. They exported almost $13.6 billion, which is incredible. If you think about it, in the previous year of 2021 totally, it was $24.8 billion. So it is likely that as we head into the second half of 2022, we will exceed 2021 by double digits. Already, our exports have grown by 20%. Industrial machinery is Wisconsin's top export category, and those increased by the greatest dollar value of $562 million or 20%. This is a broad product category that captures just about any type of heavy equipment that Wisconsin exports. It includes heating and cooling equipment, construction equipment, machine tools, food processing equipment, computers, and pretty much any machine that makes another machine. So inside of this category, we have three top categories. The first is transmission shafts, bearings, and gears, and that would go to Canada primarily. The second is spark ignition rotary engines, and that includes things like outboard marine engines. And third is our harvesting equipment. So that was up 2.1% over 2021. So in the agriculture and food products, export data appears in multiple categories, as I said, but when added together year to date, we're showing 2.2 billion for the first 6 months, placing it in second again. And Mark is going to go into that in great detail, so I don't want to steal his thunder on that. The electrical machinery exports grew by 14.3%, with strong performances in electrical transmission and conversion equipment, up by almost 40%, electrical generating sets up by almost 28%, phone sets up by almost 50%, and insulated wire and cable, again, up by 24%. Canada and Mexico receives almost 50% of this entire category. So scientific and medical instruments exported a total of almost $1.2 billion, up about 9%. X-ray apparatus exports make up about 26% of this category, and China is our largest importer of those items. Interestingly enough, vehicles and parts, well, maybe not surprisingly, over 80% of this category goes to Mexico and Canada, likely attributed to the US-Mexico-Canada agreement or the NAFTA replacement. We saw plastics, they grew by 101 million, up by 14%, again with Canada and Mexico accounting for almost 63% of all of those exports. Pharmaceutical exports related to COVID-19 vaccines totaled 730 million in the first half of 2022, up by 167%, largely due, of course, to the COVID vaccines. And the top export destination, Canada, was up by 170%. And we saw increases across other categories here, for example, aircraft parts and paper products. Let's take a quick look at where our exports went. In 2021, Canada, China, and Mexico remained our top export destinations. But the fourth and fifth position, there's usually some jockeying for position where that will change. Almost half of all of our exports continue to go to Canada and Mexico. In 2022, Canada, again, it remains Wisconsin's top trading partner, receiving 31% of all Wisconsin exports, or 17%. Mexico is Wisconsin's second largest export destination, with exports of 1.73 billion, or 16% in the first half of 2022. China received almost $1 billion of Wisconsin exports, an increase of 14%. So that's a significant increase for that category. In 2022, you'll see that there was a change in the fourth and fifth position. The UK pushed out Germany for fourth position, and that's largely attributed to a significant increase in aviation equipment purchases by the United Kingdom. This is a notoriously variable category, so that moves the UK up and down. Boeing has a significant presence in the UK. Germany moved down to fifth position, but still growing by 7% in the first half of 2022, with two export categories showing impressive growth. Industrial machinery, Wisconsin's #1 export for many, many years, was up 45%. And medical and scientific instruments grew by almost 37%. So let's take a look at our import category. So the imports pretty much mirror our exports largely. So industrial machinery remains our #1 export. Electrical machinery is second or third or fourth place, followed by scientific and medical instruments. And pharmaceuticals is largely an anomaly. There was a huge import of vaccines from Ireland during 2021 due to COVID. Let's take a quick look at how our imports look in 2022. As I said, it largely reflects our export categories. Our imports grew by 20%, or 3.3 billion in the first half. The top category was up by 14%, followed by electrical machinery up by 28%. China is by and large, the largest source of all Wisconsin exports, with 20% coming from there, followed by Canada at 16, Mexico at 10. So Wisconsin imports 7 billion from China, while we export just under 2 billion, creating a significant trade imbalance, whereas both Canada and Mexico have a fairly even trade balance with the state of Wisconsin. And we did see most of these import categories saw double-digit growth. And I'm just going to mention that in the ag products category, it was a 12% increase, and the largest three categories were wood products, miscellaneous edible foods, which include things like yeast, protein concentrates and sauces, and prepared fruits and vegetables. And when we look at our trading partners, you can see all 6 here on the screen. They remain largely unchanged in 2022. Now I'd like to move on briefly to talk about how WEDC and DATCAP collaborate on the programs that WEDC offers to companies in the state of Wisconsin. So I'm going to talk really briefly about the 4 key programs that WEDC has to offer to accelerate exports for any company located in Wisconsin. We have the Export Tech program, which is put on by the Manufacturing Extension Partnership here in Wisconsin and the Manufacturing Outreach Center at UW-Stout. This is an incredible program. We have the #1 program in the United States. Companies who have gone through the Export Tech program have come out on the other end after graduation, 12 months after graduation, with an increase in revenue sales of near $1 million. And this is significant because we're talking about typically small to medium-sized enterprises. So over 3 8-hour sessions in 3 months, companies will learn, they will identify their destination countries. They will design their elevator pitch. They'll design their export budget. They will pull everything together to become intentional exporters. And luckily, DATCAP can support their companies in going through this program. And WEDC also facilitates this program by giving scholarships up to 50% of the cost of the program, which is around $7,000 for the executive team members of any company to attend. Secondly, we always want to get boots on the ground. And as many of you exporters out there know, getting your boots on the ground in the last 2 years has been a challenge. We have, we pivoted very quickly in 2020 to go to virtual trade ventures. We didn't miss a beat. We continued to do trade ventures virtually, and companies continued to make those connections globally, even though they couldn't travel at that time. This year, we are restarting our in-person trade ventures, and you can see that schedule here on the screen, but we are going to continue to do virtual trade ventures for a variety of reasons. It could be that the country is incredibly far to travel to, and we have found that the country is very supportive of virtual events, and then the companies can use our grant program to go there in person in the future. Or it's a country where we have limited exports, but there is a growing need and interest from Wisconsin exporters, for example, with Israel. You can see that we're going to 6 countries in person, and these are selected largely by our Export Tech graduates. So they fill out a survey, and we know what their top 3 destinations have been identified as. And based upon that, we will go to these countries. And each time we go to these countries, we collaborate with DATCAP to identify companies that could fit into these trade ventures. So both WEDC and DATCAP lead trade ventures, and we try to collaborate as much as we can. Hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to have our secretaries go jointly on a trade venture together to one of the strongest countries within this group. And I think maybe that would be Mexico or Canada would offer great opportunity. The third program that we have available to all companies in Wisconsin is our market development directors and our trade representatives around the world. So WEDC has 84 countries represented around the world by different trade representatives in those countries. And the market development directors in my team help companies in Wisconsin access these trade representatives around the world. They can do all sorts of different functions for them. They could do a market assessment. Is this the right place for you to go? They could do a partner search. Are you looking for a distributor? Are you looking for a new customer? Do you need to find maintenance support in a country where your product is being exported? Or is your product caught in customs? We hope not. But these trade representatives can help all of our companies export better and have more information to qualify their possibilities to export well to those countries. Lastly, the Global Business Development Grant Program is another area where we collaborate extensively with DATCAP. So we have 2 types of grant programs. We have the International Market Access Grant, and if you just think of the I as an individual, that's for an individual company. And then we have the Collaborative Market Access Grant, or the CMAG, which DATCAP has also leveraged. So on the International Market Access Grant, companies can receive up to $10,000 if they are a non-export tech grad, or up to $25,000 if they are an export tech grad. And we do that because we value the export tech program so strongly. We see that when companies become intentional exporters, they just perform so much better. They've identified the right country. They've ensured that their product is ready to go. It's just an incredibly powerful program. And any company that goes through or accesses the IMAG program, they have to have 30% of their total budget in match towards the grant, and 35% of the value of the product or service must be from Wisconsin inputs. The Collaborative Market Access Grant, or CMAG, is a pass-through grant of up to $150,000. And DATCAP and UW River Falls have collaborated on a grant like this in the past, where it's a very specialized focus. It was always to go to the China Agriculture Trade Show or the China Dairy Trade Show that is occurring each year in China. And to participate in that, a company would have to go through DATCAP and UW River Falls to access that grant. And each company could receive assistance up to $15,000. And these grants can be used for multiple things. It could be to attend a trade show. It could be to get a CE mark in Europe or a CCC mark in China. It could be to hire consultants to help you do all of the legal paperwork that you need to export your product into another country. So there's a vast way that you can use these grants. You can also use it for education. It's possible after your C-suite has gone through Export Tech, potentially the next level of teammates need to learn more about the hands-on. How do we get paid? What are the documents we need to fill out? So all of that could be supported through the International Market Access Grant to allow your team members to be trained up on all those processes that you need to be a successful exporter. And you'll see here on the side that as part of the Wisconsin Initiative for Agriculture Exports, DATCAP and WDC have already started collaborating. And in fiscal year 22, we awarded 11 IMAGs through that program, or $110,000 in the 3 categories of meat, dairy, and crop. And the reason that we're doing this is that the IMAG program is in existence, so there's no reason for any of us to recreate the wheel. And it's easy for DATCAP and their companies to access the IMAG program. And we are partnering again with DATCAP in fiscal 23. So Randy, we're really happy to hear about the approval of the budget dollars. And we already have 1 application submitted, which is great because the 11 previous companies came through in the last 4 to 6 weeks of the IMAG program in fiscal 22. So we believe that we're going to do even better in this second year of that program. Oops. So here are all of my colleagues who help Wisconsin companies export more successfully. And I'd like to open it up to any questions.
Hey, Katie, this is Craig Brees. That was really interesting. I just got a question for you about some of the data. Well, first I should have a question about the presentation. Will it be made available to the members here or posted publicly? That's number 1. And I guess the second question is about more, I guess, drill down into more of the sectors and to the different sectors and the export destinations.
Sure.
Is that an information you guys have that you guys have available, or is that something we can pull from U.S. Census?
So all of that information is available from the US Census. We use a program called Wiser Trade to pull that data together in a more manageable manner. But each month, similar to DATCAP, we do issue a trade report. So on a quarterly basis, it's a longer report because we have the end of the quarter. And then at year end, we have a much longer report that digs deep into each category. And that is available to everyone here on the phone. So we certainly can share that trade report that we most recently submitted to the governor's office, as well as this PowerPoint that I just presented. Happy to provide both of those to the group.
Great, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Katie, a comment and maybe a question at the end of this, but you indicated that you've already received one funding request for IMEG award this year, which is great. This is just an opportunity to let everybody here know that the IMEG applications are available. So if you know somebody who would be interested, how do they go about connecting with you, Katie?
They can connect with, they can either connect me, katie.sinnott, katy.sinnott@wedc.org, or they can go to wedc.org website and look for export programs. So they would have access to both of them there. But thank you for calling out the IMAG program. We really do want to get more applications in earlier, and our trade venture applications are open as well.
Great. Well, it's, for those who don't know, we've had a long time partnership with WEDC, and I'm glad Katie was able to kind of highlight some of the ways we've been working together for quite a while, actually, to increase exports, while also kind of making sure that we talk about how the Wisconsin Initiative on Ag Exports is inserting agriculture and agriculture products in some of their existing programs. It's I agree with you, Katie. No need to recreate the wheel if we have a program that fits the export needs of agriculture as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Katie from the group? Okay, if none, Katie, will you be able to stay with us for a while? Great. Thanks a lot for being part of the discussion and the data that you presented. It's helpful, and thanks for your willingness to share it with the members too. Now I believe we're going to transition to Mark Rodahesh with the DATCAP's Wisconsin Agribusiness Center, and he's going to go through DATCAP export and business development information. And one thing I'll mention, because it's fresh off of Katie's comment about the IMEG grant applications, the export expansion grants that DATCAP has created as part of the Wisconsin Initiative for Ag Exports are going to be available beginning in October. And I believe Mark will probably cover a little bit about that when he's going through. We were successful in the first year of getting those grants out to organizations so that they could kind of build their export plan. We're looking forward to having the funding now to do that in year 2. With that, I will transition it over to Mark Rodahesh.
Great, thank you, Andy. I'm going to bring up share the screen here. Hopefully it's working. You should be able to see the oak tree that Prairie Oaks State Office Building is named after. So thanks for the opportunity. And before we jump into data, and I'll just move to the next slide, hopefully. There we go. Just a quick review of the agenda. So we started off with opening remarks. Katie talked about all goods exports and some of the WDC programs. And then we'll talk about export data specific to agricultural products, and then we'll have some discussion and opportunity for questions and comments after. But following on to Katie's presentation, information around the way that we collaborate and the programs and the supports that are for companies. And we like to think of it as both and maybe both and, because there is the long-standing state programs that WDC has. There are federal programs that we've been working with for years. to help companies grow their exports. And this Wisconsin Initiative for Agricultural Exports, this funding is state funding for program. First time in our state history that our department has some of those resources to be able to help move specifically those food, forestry, and agriculture products that we've been talking about in those three product groups of dairy, meat, and crops. Our approach a little bit different from WDC in that we're doing more in terms of trade show pavilions. And this is back from when working with several of the groups like Food Export Midwest and U.S. Livestock Genetics Export as a couple of examples. But then we also do inbound buyer groups where they'll come into the state to be able to meet with the prospective suppliers in state. We've done that in a number of categories. We'll continue to do so. A little bit newer for us would be trade missions. So one thing to point out, right now, there's a trade mission under recruitment at WDC for England and Scotland, and that'll be happening in October. That registration date's coming up soon, 26th of August, as I remember. And then as well, we have a trade mission planned for, again, food, forestry, and agricultural products to the UK in May, June of 2023. That's utilizing the WIAE funds. And the benefit of having the approval on those funds available now is that we're able to do that planning that takes 6, 8, 10 months at least to be able to pull together an important mission like that. But the whole purpose of these missions, either WDC or ours, is to have the companies be meeting with their prospective buyers, their suppliers, suppliers, well, potentially, but mostly buyers, agents, reps, could be end user customers, but to really understand the market and to be able to do that handshake and make that deal. And some of the work that we do is in preparation to be able to get to that point. So we will be looking to leverage these resources to be able to do this. And Katie makes a great point. The funds being available in March, we were able to actually move pretty quickly to be able to get the grants provided, those export expansion grants, as well as the IMAG grants, and that'll continue on. Those IMAG grant supports out of the WIAE funding is specific for food, forestry, and agricultural products and goods in those companies. And as well, there's some support for that Export Tech program that Katie talked about for companies that are farming operations. So the ginseng growers, the fresh potato and vegetable growers, the mink operations. So there are a number, hundreds really, of operations in the state that in that program to be able to make the tuition cost of that equal for all participants, then there's some of the WIAE funds that are going in to support that program. And as you can see the benefit, you have access to more often and larger amounts of that international market access grant, and you just move further faster in whatever market that you've chosen through that process. So again, that collaboration is important. It is a both and approach that we want to take these funds that already exist and then integrate what we have been doing all along with this new funding to really move the needle, because at the end of the 5-year term for the WIAE funding, we'll need to have increased our exports in these product categories by 25% from our record base year in 2021. So we really do need all hands on deck and all businesses really participating in these activities. So thanks, Katie, for the information and our continued collaboration. So I'd like to talk to you about specifically the agricultural product exports. So dairy, meat, and crop are the major groups, and we'll explain a bit about what goes into those groups. So we had a nearly $4 billion year, $3.94 billion in 2022, record year. If you take a look at this 5-year trend, we had some pretty significant drops throughout that time, and actually the year before that. Some of that's pandemic, some of it was retaliatory tariffs, some of it was some challenges economically in some of the countries. And of course, pandemic was a major contributor to that. Year to date, we're up 14.1%, so about $270 million. Our average over the 5 years, if we look so far, it's 3.53 billion. So we're well above average. And on this quarter, as you can see, at 2.18, almost 2.2 billion. If we run roughly similar to what we have for the year, and across all categories, there's a lot of seasonality for some products, but when you aggregate them, as we move forward through the year, we're on track to likely equal or exceed that record year, just looking at where we are right now. Many things can happen in the interim, but over the next few months, and we have the data up through June right now. There's about a 6-week lag from the time that the month ends until we have the data available as U.S. Census processes that information. And what's interesting is this growth is despite huge challenges. We've had inflation, we've had the pandemic, and still have lockdowns in several countries. There are container shortages, logistics challenges. So all of those things you would think would push down the amount of business we would be able to do export, and the dollar is strengthening in a number of markets. So as we look at all those things, you would think it's down, but the one major piece pushing against that is just the strong global demand. It's been pent up over the last couple of years of pandemic, and especially in food and agricultural products. That's important, as we saw in a couple of other categories that Katie had mentioned, that there really are that tailwind, as some of the economists call it, is helping to still push us along and maintain that growth. Over time, we'll see if that holds, but right now we're looking at as well a very strong year. And it's important in a strong, just as it is in a weak year, it's important in a strong year to go out there and find those customers, establish those contracts, because everyone else is doing it too. So if we're not, as they say, at the table, you're on the plate. So our top 5 markets, and similar to Katie and the overall products, Canada, then China, Mexico, Korea, and Japan. So those are our top 5. They make up about 68% of the total, so 2/3 of the total more. And as you notice, 3 of those markets, Canada, Korea, and China, are all up double digits. For years, Mexico was our number 2 market, and China displaced them, not because China, we exported that much more to China. It was more that we exported that much less to Mexico. And they've still been having some challenges economically, as well as what the challenges happened with the pandemic. And we really do need Mexico to be a strong second market for us, just because of their proximity, a preference for U.S. goods. So as their economy improves, hopefully we'll be able to see some more business out of them. And they're at 0.7, not even 1%, or just about. But that's actually good news, because they had been down in other periods. We're 13th in the U.S. overall for dairy, meat, and crop product exports. In a number of other categories, whether it's the size of our state, our GDP, all products were in the low 20s. So we do punch a bit above our weight in terms of our exports of agricultural products. What I'd like to do before we talk about the individual categories, wanted to spend a little bit of time on the harmonized system HS code, also Schedule B numbers. What you're seeing here on the screen is description of that from the International Trade Administration, and that comes through the Department of Commerce. And those codes are used for exports, both and for imports. Schedule B for exports, harmonized system, HS system, or HS codes as they're commonly known, for imports. It's a 10-digit number that helps identify products, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But its main purpose really is so that we can assess customs against products inbound. Other countries can do that in duties the other direction. And of course, as we saw with the retaliatory tariffs, that countries use those as well to identify which products are going to target with those sanctions, or if there's a free trade agreement, to be able to provide a preferential duty rate, or maybe even a 0 duty rate, as we have with the USMCA in most product cases. And we also use this for really understanding the statistics. So how do we use HS codes? We classify the goods. There's the AES, Automated Export System. That's really how we gather the data, anything less than $2,500. And there's a couple of several items that require an export license, certainly for dual use for military, for example. Some sensitive items require a license no matter what the cost is. And again, it's driven by that HS code number. You need to be able to put this on your shipping documentation to make any sort of shipment. And so the instructions to your freight forwarders, the invoice that you send to your customer, and also for certificates of origin that are used mainly to be able to prove that a product is from the country that has the free trade agreement. But we also use that for market research and to get trade statistics. And then in some cases, as I mentioned about those requirements under US law, that you would need a license to be able to ship some of these goods. So, and Craig, your question around information. So that Wiser Trade tool that we have in both WDC and actually through their subscription to that service, we actually have a seat. And for years, WDC has granted us that position and that access to that tool. So every year they're spending the cost on helping to do that. So that's been a long-term collaboration for us, but it's actually an extremely important tool. We use it to, all the data you see here on dollars is actually through the US Census trade data set that then gets moved through that Wiser Trade data tool interface. And so we're able to actually drill down pretty deeply into 6 digits of the HS code, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But we're able to pull data for folks, for companies as well. So besides the reporting we do, we can also work with you. And if you go through Export Tech, for example, then we're helping to provide some of that information through this tool to be able to zero in on who's buying these goods, how much is the US exporting overall, and then how are the goods imported, how much of the import. That tool actually shows us what the imports are by those same numbers. To understand what your HS number is, or your Schedule B number for exports, that there's a link in this, and we'll send this presentation out, so those this will be available to you, and those are hot links. So you would go to that search engine to be able to find the HS number, those specific numbers that you would be looking for. So I thought quickly we could just do a little bit of a test, and a little difficult to do in a poll, but just thinking through that. So how is frozen pizza classified? So you think about, so I type into frozen pizza into the search engine. Sometimes you have to change the terms a little bit. Is it cheese? Because there's a lot of cheese on there. In Wisconsin, we would say it's pretty much a cheese item. Of course, pepperoni pizza, sausage, etc. Is it meat, or is it something else? So as we think about that, what category would be in? And it might be surprising to a number of folks to see that it's, preparations of cereals, flour, starch, or milk, pastries, or cooked products. So you think, well, I would never have thought that. When I looked that up, I would have thought there would have been maybe a separate category, something more specific. But this is the challenge sometimes with the HS system and this data reporting, that some items are grouped together. And as we look at the result, and it may be a little bit difficult to see, I know it's a little bit light, at the very bottom of that big green arrow. So the 10-digit number is 1905.90, and then 9060. And those last 4 are really that drive it into what pizza and quiche are. So if I want to know how much pizza is being imported, frozen pizzas, how much is being exported from the US, then I go to those first 6 numbers, 1905.90. But that's also pizza and quiche. So it's not something that gets you so specific that you know exactly your product, but it gets you quite close. There are other resources, they're paid services to be able to get a little bit more direct information, but not as complete. But some services to get more close to your specific product, those cost quite a bit more. But in many cases, once you've identified a strong market, it's worth that to understand what your competitors are doing or where your opportunity is. And that's some of the work that we can help connect you with as you are assessing which is your next market if you're an existing exporter, or your new markets if you are planning to export or beginning as an emerging exporter. And as you can see, the UOM, unit of measure, sometimes it's pieces, sometimes it's kilograms, in order to be able to, and that's also used in terms of the tariff rates that are in different countries and which ones have free trade agreements with us. So all of that to get us to this point, which is our product groups. So in the WIAE legislation, then we are to increase by 25% products in dairy products, meat and meat products, crop and crop products. Dairy is pretty straightforward. It is for Wisconsin, as our friends at DFW have in a lot of their information, 90% of our milk goes into cheese. And so that's a major product for us as well, because if we're making cheese, we're also making whey. And then those milk protein isolates that come off of that. So a large amount of what we're selling both in the US and around the world is cheese. In fact, we're a #1 exporter of specialty cheeses overall, and typically around 4th or 5th across all categories of cheese as an exporter from the US. So as we look at this particular group, it's year to date, Q2, $300 million, close to. It's 14% of all that we export in agricultural products, up 37.5%. As we see those top products, whey is actually the larger chunk, at least year to date here, with 30% of the total of these products. This product group. 28% is cheese and curd, and then milk albumin, those are the milk protein isolates, lactose, another food ingredient byproduct, better fats, and others. So you can see that it's been a very good first half of the year for dairy. We've had some more challenging years in the last couple, so this is great to see. We've got Korea up nearly 80%, Japan up 74% almost. Mexico even, which is challenged elsewhere, but 44% up. Canada, where we have tariff rate quotas and some limits in terms of what we're able to grow in that market, they've even been up 25%. So again, that increased demand, and I think a lot more, even with concerns about inflation, people are still, as we're hearing in news reports, that folks their spend is maybe not a lot less, but they're spending more on food than maybe other items that they would normally do at the consumer level. Our top 5 countries make up almost 2/3 of that, so it's a big piece of that. But you look at our top 5 products, and especially in dairy, but it's 92% of what we do. We don't really ship that much in the way of fluid milk, certainly at all, or even milk powders. But again, a promising year, at least to date, for dairy products. Meat products, so again, we took those HS numbers that are associated to meat, and we did in dairy as well. Some of those protein isolates come from a different chapter in the HS system. They start off with the first 2 digits, kind of is the major group. And so we had to go and finding those. With meat, it becomes a bit broader, because in meat we have, of course, meat preparations like sausage, but we also have what's actually in the code is animal parts, but what that really means for us in Wisconsin are genetics, so bovine semen. And as you see, those top 5 products that make up 90% of the group, so again, they're a major part of what we do. 26%, the genetics are 24%, meat and offal, so the meat cuts, but also the different parts that maybe we don't eat as much here, but are done in other markets, eaten in other markets, 22%. Fur skins, and for Wisconsin, what that means is mink. We have leather, we ship a fair bit of that as well, some other hides, but by and large, fur skins, 12%. So it's those animal products in general, but also peptones and proteins, so the animal byproducts as you do that processing, some of those proteins that turn into food ingredients. Meat didn't really rise as much as we see. So as we look at the categories, Canada actually down about 8%. China's up 19%. China's much more in terms of whey in terms of the feed for largely for their swine population, and then some in the way of genetics. Finland, and you might wonder, wow, Finland, are they eating that many brats? Actually, at up 96% almost, that's mink. The major buyer in the world right now for mink, the company that used to be in Canada, has taken over that operation in Wisconsin, and that mink is being shipped to that we grow here, and it's as you can see at 51 million versus 26 million last year. They've had some really tough years in the last few years, so it's great to see that's growing in the way that it is. But that's why Finland's on the list like this. Korea as well. Japan up a little bit. Korea up double digits, as you see. Both of those, that's more of the dairy products, some of the whey, but also some of the cheeses and other dairy products. And then finally, crop. And this is our largest category. It really draws together a number of products. So look at the top 5 products, and that's only about half. So that speaks to the breadth of items that are in that, but beverages and spirits. And certainly we have some great craft distilled spirits and all. We make some fantastic beers in the state. Beverages in a lot of cases here, especially, is ethanol. So that's a beverage, I guess, for cars, maybe more than anything else, but that's 13% at least year to date. These percentage contributions can change a little bit from year to year, or I'm sorry, from quarter to quarter. As we get towards the end of the year, then it tends to smooth out. So there may be some changes in those, but they stay relatively close. Prepared vegetables, so think about canned sweet corn, which we're #1 exporter of, but also wood products, so timber and lumber, to the semi-finished products. So not furniture, but some of those building materials, for example, and cross-laminated timbers and those kinds of things, as well as some other wood products that are sold in other markets, which they turn into the finished products. And then prepared cereals. So remember that category about frozen pizzas? Well, I don't know that we ship a lot of frozen pizzas. We don't have that kind of visibility of the data, but it is a part of that. But certainly in a number of other areas, all other products, nearly 50%. Now we won't go into it here, but we can drill much deeper into each one of those categories. So for particular companies or industry groups who would like to see a much greater detail, then we're able to do that to the 6-digit level in our HS code, harmonized system code. So we can help to provide that as we do. These are larger overviews, but we've had a reasonably good year, not as big as dairy, but still up 14.2%, 182 million. It's nearly $1.5 billion. The top 5 countries, so there is a bit more concentration in countries. We look at Canada, Mexico, China, Germany, and Japan. Again, those can change over time, but as we see, Mexico is in this case a #2 market, and that would include not only the products that humans eat, but also animal feeds that would be fitting into this category. So as you can see, a big category, broad range. So the good news in that is if one area is down, another area can be up, but it can also be a little bit more complicated in terms of what trade shows, what countries, because that can differ between companies who are selling maybe more to developing markets in those feed and inputs and food ingredients versus the finished food products that may go to the more developed markets. So a lot of that work then in terms of helping us understand by those industries as well as these major product groups. Very quickly on the sources, we've talked about the US Census, that trade data set. The advantage of that is that everyone who exports, unless it's under that threshold of $2,500, does an AES filing. And it has the HS number, it has the dollars, it has the number of units. It is the most comprehensive way and the easiest way for us to be able to compare vastly different items because everybody sells in dollars. And it's the actual shipment volumes. Where our challenge comes in is we have some lack of the unit volume data in the reporting, because what gets reported from US Census, they collected, but what gets reported is, for example, weights of materials. So if I'm a producer of soybeans or corn, some of these commodity products, even cheeses, I may want to know how many tons of product are shipping. So is our exports up just because the price of everything is up because of inflation, because we just got a higher price point, but we're actually shipping less in products, or the other way around, are we not getting as much money for our products and we're shipping way more? The challenge in that is that this reporting doesn't provide for us what gets shipped by land on truck or rail, and our two largest markets by and large are Canada and Mexico. Just about everything else, of course, has to go on the water. So it goes on a vessel. Those weights get tracked. So we are looking at ways to be able to better understand that. The USDA has its global agricultural trade system as well. They have some other reporting. And when they talk about exports at the USDA level, they talk about exports from state to state, as well as exports outside of the US. And they're using some other methods, for example, cash receipts. They're tracking what companies are selling, and farms and other operations distributors are selling. Their information is focused on commodities. They do provide some unit volume, so we can see some directional information on where volumes are going for things like corn and soybeans, certainly a number of those commodity products, but at the national level only. We don't really have that state level data. The ERS is the other service out of USDA. So they do things a little bit, same approach, but when they're talking about dollars, they're also drawing from this US Census export data. So this leads us to what we were talking about, which is unit volume reporting for agricultural exports. And Andrew Stevens is on with us. Actually had a conversation with several of the ag economists within the UW system, just to have an initial conversation around how we might do this reporting, how we might be able to calculate to understand on some key commodities, at least, what that unit volume, that weight that we're shipping, so we can lay that up against the dollars, or at least be able to see the trends between how the dollars are going, but then also how the pounds, how the kilograms in this case for overseas shipments. But how much of that weight is changing? Are we producing a lot more and shipping a lot more, but we're not getting as much for it, or the way around? So that conversation at least was a starting point. We'll need to do some more, because what we've determined, there isn't really a report out there that does that. And the one way potentially would to be extremely accurate would be to everybody who exports any of these commodities to do this by survey and have them tell us exactly how much they shipped in terms of pounds of a particular product over the year, or group of products within a HS category. That has its challenges, just in terms of being able to pull it together, but also everyone participating to get that accuracy. There are also ways to calculate it. So we'll continue to talk about how we get that information, because that was a point that was brought up at our previous, the first in May, that first Wisconsin Agricultural Export Advisory Council meeting to be able to get that. So with that, I'll launch into, and I'll stop sharing unless someone wants to see and we can just bring it back up if need be, to be able to see each other. But I thought we could maybe with that point start off with that conversation around unit volume exports and other questions you might have and other needs you might have for data reporting.
Mark, one thing before we do that, are there any questions for Mark or Andrew Stevens from UW? Do you have anything that you'd like to share with the group since you're joining? Okay, so to the group, any questions for Mark before he proceeds into the further discussion?
Well, actually, this is Greg. Sorry to chime in here with just a quick comment. I just got one quick question about the Schedule B. Schedule B import data that might be helpful for others. I can leave the comment at the end if you'd like me to, but it's just about the classification process.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead, please.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so just in terms of using Schedule B, as Mark knows, I used to work in international trade law in my past life, and I just want to quickly comment. I know that classification isn't always easy or what you'd expect. I know there can be a difference between import classification under the tariff schedule and export classification Schedule B, but the import data can be very, very helpful for determining how your exported goods are classified under Schedule B. And I mentioned the HTS or their import data because there are a lot of resources that are available for import classification. U.S. Customs publishes classification rulings for importers. There are over 200,000 to date. So any exporter can perform import classification research using these rulings, get a sense of where they land in the import, HTS US, and then by correlation where they should look in Schedule B. I'm happy to be available for anybody who's got some questions about classification in particular, based on my background. So.
Great, thanks for that, Craig. And it is really more art, I think, sometimes in science, and even, there is an agreement even between the folks who are making the rulings as to what things are. And sometimes you do have a chance to be able to say, what you have this classified at isn't really correct, and it needs to be something different, or in some cases they create a new one. And I know it's a lot of rulings, a lot of pages to go through. So Craig, thank you for being able to offer up your time and assistance. And I know a lot of folks also work through import-export brokers, freight forwarders, and those folks, that's their livelihood. That's what they do. So my recommendation, some companies have their own in-house folks who are licensed to brokers within the company, but a lot of companies will rely on third parties, so other folks to help them with that. And I very quickly here, let me just oops, lost the screen. So are you able to see me? There we go.
I can see you, Mark.
Okay, great, thanks. My screen keeps jumping. I thought I meant to introduce the team. So the last slide didn't show up, and I'm having trouble getting back into it. But Lisa Stout, as you met at the start, and Jennifer Liu, also Luis Santana. He's not able to join us today. Lisa handles processed foods, food ingredients, Canada, Asia, and the Middle East, by and large. And then Jennifer Liu is animal feed, forestry products, and ginseng, livestock and genetics. And that's Asia, Middle East, and Africa. And then Luis Santana is animal feed, livestock, genetics in the Americas, Europe, and Africa. And then there is a fourth position open, which we'll be filling by the middle of September, because we're normally a team of 4. And they'll be joining us here shortly, and we'll be able to introduce them at our Wisconsin Agricultural Export Advisory Council. We call it WACC, the WACC meeting in September the 23rd. But I missed doing that before I closed off and went into discussion. So wanted to at least, if there are any more comments or questions around the reporting of exports by unit volume, by weights, but also of those assembled, what other data might you want to see or might you need? We have that, Craig, and I know your request about some additional data on specific products, and we can certainly drill in for either industry groups or for individuals. But seeing what we provide, seeing what Katie and the folks at WDC pull together, what kind of information do you find useful that we maybe don't provide here that you'd like to see, or maybe more of one thing or another? All right. Well, and so one of those things, as I mentioned, the group of agricultural economists, is that we'll come together a bit of a panel to really talk about what other information they might find useful for us to share. And certainly please send a message, and this is also being recorded. I know Wissai, you're broadcasting, and it's available for folks to see if you have the subscription. So reaching out to those folks who may be watching this later, that please send us some information, send us a message, and we'll be able to respond to that and see if we can incorporate what that request is. And Katie, I see your picture's live here. So did you want to say something?
Just a thank you, and I'll pass that information of the PowerPoint and our quarterly trade report to you, Mark, so that you can distribute it to the team.
Excellent. Thanks, Katie. Yeah, we'll put that on we have a web page for the International Agribusiness Center in the datcap.wi.gov website. And we can link that information, Katie, that you're doing and put that on that page. There's a page specific for the Wisconsin Initiative for Agricultural Exports. So we can put that information there. We have a number of other things, but you can also see resources in our agricultural statistics. Export statistics are in that International Agribusiness Center page as well.
Mark, for point of reference for the council members who are present, what's the timeline for you working with the economists to try to gather some thoughts about export quantification?
Yep. So we'll be coming together. Folks are traveling, school's starting up, but what we're looking to do is get the group back together before that 23rd September WACC meeting. The advisory council meeting, and at least be able to have some preliminary ideas of direction on how we pull that together. It's going to take some time, I think, to get a comprehensive number, but we're able to get some early, so that idea of minimum viable product, get some early information, but then also work through what that methodology will be to be able to get that unit volume data at a greater detail and more regularly reported, just like we do for our quarterly export highlights. And thinking about, for example, what Steve Deller does, UW Extension, in that contribution of agriculture to the Wisconsin economy that he produces every 5 years after the survey of agriculture that USDA does. He takes their data, uses a system which WDC has as well called Implan. It's an economic modeling system to be able to gather those data around the inputs, around the sales, around the employment, all those bits and pieces that come together so that they come up with that $104.8 billion number as the contribution of agriculture to the economy. And in fact, that survey's happening fairly soon. So that it takes about a year, though it's quite a large process because he also does it at the county level. That'll be coming out about a year from now. But within the kinds of approach, not that this big a project that we would be doing for this export data, but similar to that, where we'll have to do some calculations and have the PhD economists to really help us out with being able to understand how we do that in a way that's repeatable and reliable.
So, Mark, you ran through a lot of data in a short period of time. Is it fair to say that what we're seeing right now so far this year is solid and encouraging growth, especially given some of the global challenges we're seeing right now?
So far, so good. Okay. Yes, I think we've had, it's surprisingly in some respects strong. And, Katie, I mean, we're up, what, 14% or so in food and ag. I think all U.S. food and ag is up about 15%. So we're tracking relatively close to them. But across all those manufactured products, Katie, you were up 20%, it was?
Yeah, we're up 18%. The US is up 20%. So I think we're really on target to exceed 2021 by a good amount, because we're already at, what is it, 13.6 billion in exports at the 6-month mark. And it's usually the fourth quarter that's the strongest quarter in general. So.
Yeah, and ours, I think fall, on the calendar year, certainly the fall can be quite strong, for us as well in some of these areas. Again, there's some seasonality, but a lot of the processed foods that are going on, dairy, for example, that's going on all the time. So yeah, we tend to see, we don't see a big push in the fourth quarter, but it also doesn't fall off either. So you hate to make a prediction that it's going to be really big when it isn't, but I don't know, it's pretty strong. And USDA does an outlook. So certainly on the next round that they do, we can bring some of that information in to at least see what their economists are saying, because they do that forward look as well for the some key commodities and food and ag products.
Yeah, I always like to look at the quarter two is this is a snapshot in time, and there's it's difficult to predict for sure what happens between now and the end of the year, but you can look back, which I'm glad you did the panel with the 5-year average, because what that shows is a record year last year coming out of the pandemic. But even before the pandemic, we had down years because of the trade disruptions we were seeing with the tariffs and the retaliatory tariffs. So we've seen really good growth in ag exports specifically, as we've kind of moved beyond some of those trade disruptions and continue to find new markets. So that 5-year look back also helps, because we've got a 5-year plan that we've put together in cooperation with WEDC, looking forward, and how we hope to and expect to grow ag exports specifically over the next 5 years.
Absolutely.